All right, welcome everyone. We're very glad to see you today. The ACC National Capital Region Career Development Committee is pleased to present this program, 2025 Legal Hiring Trends and Leveraging Contract Talent Professionals, in collaboration with our sponsor, Robert Half. I'm Shaniqua Brooks, Corporate Counsel at Regenexx Bio Inc., and a member of the Career Development Committee. And together with Rich Spittelnick, Lead Senior Counsel at CBRE, we will serve as the chapter's host for today's event. This program will last 60 minutes and does not offer CLE credit. Our panelists will stay on for a bit after the program concludes, should you have any additional questions. After the program ends, we will send you a request for feedback, and we would appreciate your thoughts on the program and your interest for future programming. Before we begin, I do have a few housekeeping items. One, the panelists' comments are their own. They should not be publicized without their permission, should not be construed as legal advice, and do not represent the positions of their organizations or ACC NCR. I would like to thank today's sponsor and speakers of today's session: Patrick Doherty, Vice President and Division Director; Katie Ludholm, Branch Director from Robert Half Legal; and Farisa Dasbar, Deputy Counsel, North America at Willis Towers Watson. Robert Half is a longtime sponsor and partner of the chapter and thrilled to host today's session. Two, we welcome your input during today's program. If you would like to raise a question or offer a comment, please use the chat feature located at the bottom of your screen. We will give you the opportunities to participate via the chat, so keep an eye on that. The panelists may not be able to respond to every question during the program, but we'll try to address as many as possible. And three, this program is being recorded. And with that, I will turn it over to today's speakers to begin today's discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Shaniqua. Just a quick intro. Patrick Doherty, Practice Director with Robert Half. It's really nice to be with everyone today. I've been with Robert Half for about 15 years and I've been placing consultants for pretty much that entire time.
All right. And I am Katie Lundholm. I'm also with Robert Half. I'm the branch director for our Washington, D.C. office. I've been with Robert Half for over 13 years. And just like Patrick, I really have spent the majority of my time at Robert Half placing contractors and consultants. I also manage our permanent placement team as well. And just a little bit of a disclaimer today. If I sound winded, I am about 9 months pregnant, and so I get out of breath pretty quickly. So I'm not running a marathon over here. Just wanted to explain if I sound out of breath, that is why. So Farisa, over to you.
Congratulations. And
Thank you.
I'm Farisa Dasbar. I am in-house at WTW as Deputy General Counsel for our Risk and Broking segment in North America. Happy to be with you all.
All right. So in terms of today's presentation, what we'll cover, this first bullet point here, the legal hiring market trends and strategic priorities. Patrick and I are really going to kind of just go into the data of the market data, what's going on in the current job market, especially as it comes to legal and trends. And then for the utilizing contract professionals and onboarding best practices and Q&A, that's really where we're going to have the true panel discussion, make it conversational, and that first, part of the presentations kind of laying the groundwork for all of
that. So first, we just kind of wanted to start with some kind of national numbers of kind of data on what the job market looks like as a whole, in legal, but, basically, everything. So the U.S. unemployment rate in October, kind of the most recent data was 4.1%. There's about 7.4 million job openings as of September. And then about 3.3 million people quitting as of September 2024.
All right, and as you can see, the unemployment rates for lawyers and other legal professionals are well below that national average. And so what does that mean, right? So while it's not the great resignation we saw back in 2021 or 2022, the market is still incredibly tight. Legal professionals are very, very in demand at the moment. And so, we're the market, while we're seeing a lot of people, what we call the great stay, a lot of candidates for in-demand roles are staying in their current jobs, reluctant to leave at the moment, for whatever reason, obviously the election, any type of uncertainty around like recession, and job seekers ultimately not wanting to be in a last hired, first fired situation. And so really, as we get more into this presentation, these numbers and this, the low unemployment numbers for lawyers and paralegal and legal assistants will show how contractors can help bridge those gaps where, employers are struggling to find the talent that they need.
And so just moving on to some trends that we're seeing, salaries, are typically rising for trial attorneys, litigation personnel. I think that the remote phenomenon has provided a more flexible working option for a lot of people. That's really important to a lot of people. As important as pay hikes. We can talk. We're going to talk a little bit about this later in the presentation, but I think, if you, have that remote flexibility and you're looking to hire people, that's really attractive to, a lot of candidates out there. The data that we collect are from law firms and corporate legal departments. So they're the surveys that we send out throughout the course of the year, just getting feedback from decision makers within legal departments. And so some things that kind of stood out to us, in talking to people all across the country, are, compliancy and privacy are driving a lot of the in-house hiring. So, as technology has become more prevalent, as AI is, really blowing up out there, law firms and corporate legal departments are definitely trying to adjust to like sort of the new normal. From a risk management perspective, putting data privacy and security, protocols in place, managing their entities, making sure their governance is on point. I think that, people want to hire candidates with these types of skills who can hit the ground running right away.
All right. And so for legal salaries and flexibility, kind of piggybacking off of what Patrick was saying, there are certain skills that managers will increase salaries for, especially when it's like a subject matter expert, someone that has that compliance and risk management, as that's one of the most in demand areas that we're seeing at the moment. And sometimes, if a job seeker is just looking for a high salary, sometimes that can put a corporate legal department at a disadvantage because you generally can't match the big paychecks that many other law firms, might be offering for the same work. But it's about finding the right job seeker, and that's where the flexibility comes in. As all of you know, one of the biggest incentives of going in-house is that increased work-life balance. And it's not, and like a lot of the job seekers that we know we work with all the time understand that, that might come with a little bit of a pay cut for that increased work-life balance. And so I think to Patrick's point before, offering that hybrid work option, offering the remote work option, we see time and time again that job seekers will take a little bit of a lower salary for increased flexibility versus a higher paying role where they're expected to be in the office like 5 days a week. So definitely the flexibility can be a big competitive advantage there.
Yeah, for sure. And we've definitely, we work with a lot of law firms and have definitely seen seeing them very motivated to, have people in the office at least 4 days a week. Sometimes they'll give someone some flexibility on a Friday. But for the most part, and there's obviously exceptions, but, for the many that I work with, they're back in pretty much full time. And so, how managers are bridging the skills gaps, with, a lot of the new technologies, legal teams are facing, skills gaps in e-discovery, e-filing, in contracts, right? Like so many companies just manage their contracts on an Excel spreadsheet, right? But there are these new, tools that are accessible and, out to purchase, CRMs where, you have like Salesforce, you can manage contracts on Salesforce. So candidates who have that skill set, beyond just sort of the contracts administration, but who can actually understand a platform, that is brings a lot of value. So what companies are doing, they're trying to upskill employees, try to get them the training and the professional certifications that they're looking for, reskilling, having them, maybe they're focused on contracts, teaching them that corporate governance, entity management side of the house. And then, outsourcing, there's a lot of companies, like Robert Half, who, can manage projects for you. If you're looking to implement, a new contract system, there's so many companies out there who can help, make that process a smooth one, and not have it all fall, on you, when you have, 10 other things that you're juggling. So yeah, I think that there's, a lot of what we're seeing is companies investing in their people. Like if, you have, an employee who, raises their hand and wants to expand, privacy is a really good example. Like that was an area that really didn't exist 20 years ago. When I was in law school, I don't think it was mentioned, it's a long time ago, but, as sort of that, GDPR came into play and, things changed really quickly over the last 10 years. The candidates who raised their hands and wanted to get the trainings, wanted to get those certifications, I think it just made them, more dynamic within a legal department, allowed them to do more, and kind of gave them, rewarded them with, that more broad skill set where they were more marketable and, attractive to another company.
All right. So hiring challenges, we did a recent survey where 8 in 10 legal hiring managers report difficulty in finding candidates with the necessary specialized skills that they're looking for when hiring. And I think that just kind of echoes what we've been talking about with the low unemployment rates and, how in demand these professionals are, and why so many organizations are looking for different ways to bridge that gap. And, that's something, to kind of back off of the last slide and what Patrick was saying, so many managers are discussing how to upskill their employees or outsource certain subject matter expert roles to contractors, consulting firms and managed services firms. I think that, right now, in terms of the hiring timeline, which we'll talk about a little bit later too, it is difficult to find that permanent candidate. Like we are in that quote unquote great stay. Like I was talking about, our permanent placement recruiters are finding it, harder and harder to get responses when they're reaching out to recruit for candidates because the people are less likely to move at the moment. And so you may have a longer period of time where a role remains open. So how are you going to bridge that gap? How are you going to get that work done in the meantime and prevent your current employees from burning out? And so that's where, that's where bringing in a contractor to fill that position in the meantime, while you're looking to make a hire can be a big benefit to the organization or upskilling or transferring employees around, making sure that the work is getting spread out a little bit more. So just making sure that you're figuring out a way to bridge that gap while you're looking for your next permanent perfect person.
And just to add on to that, like, I think there's a tendency to just, when you lose someone kind of like, unexpectedly, there's a tendency to kind of shift, the work to your existing team or take it on yourself, right? That's sort of the first, the first, move, right? But, I think that gets old really quick, as a lot of you have probably experienced. I think the contract consultant option alleviates some of that, pain, pressure point for you, but also your team, right? Like, especially like coming out of, COVID, like people were just kind of like stressed out, so you've really run the risk of burnout, right? More people are doing, like, more people in the legal department are doing more, like they're taking on things, and they're driven, right? They want to, they want to, bolster their career. And they might not be raising their hands when they're facing, 50, 60-hour weeks. So, that I think that burnout is definitely something, as managers, I know myself who manages, a whole team of consultants. I always worry about that when I see their hours are just, off the charts, and, I have clients, sending them a lot of overtime, that burnout is something that I think the contract consulting route really helps. Sometimes it takes, a couple weeks or months to realize that. Strategic priorities. So, surveyed legal departments. We've seen a lot of our clients just try to provide mechanisms in their department to optimize and efficiency. Contracts is a great example. I think that again, Excel spreadsheet, that's great. You can do that if you have a very limited amount of contracts that you're managing. But as your company expands, as you get busier, as your sales team grows, I think a lot of companies over the last 5 years or so have put mechanisms in place where they can manage that high volume and manage it efficiently. And so definitely seeing a lot of that, implementing the technology and automation. I always just remember back to when I first started doing this with e-discovery projects. We'd staff, teams of 50 document review attorneys, and they were just reviewing documents, coding them for relevance, most of which, were irrelevant to the case, but they had to review them. They had to put eyes on it anyway. And over the last 15 years, there's technologies that will call these documents down where, 15 years ago, you'd be reviewing $2 million. The technology and the AI can whittle that down to 200,000, right? And get rid of all those, labels or irrelevant documents to the case. So I think the same is happening sort of across the board, in the contract space, compliance, and, and then, the risk management and litigation as well. And then I think, this is kind of a moving target. AI is fairly new. I know we've incorporated it into our business. We have a tool which, rolled out where I basically just, type in, write me a corporate paralegal job description, and it just posts me, basically writes my job descriptions for me, and I tweak it, or tell that to tweak it. It's wild, and saves, a ton of time, allows me, to do things that, will help people find jobs and not spend, kind of after hours just writing the perfect job description. So, we're starting to see that. And, I'm actually, interested in the Q&A if anyone has any examples of, how they're seeing AI pop up in their corporate legal departments. That's something I'm always really interested in. And then,
yeah, and then the hot jobs in legal, and in-demand practice areas and industries as well. And so, not going to, go over every single bullet on this slide, but in general, obviously Patrick and I were working with different organizations every single day, and we can definitely say that a lot of this is is spot on. I would say where we're kind of seeing the most in demand specifically for contractors. Again, that's what Patrick and I specialize in. We're seeing a lot in the contracts management space in all levels. So whether it's a contracts administrator up through an attorney that can kind of handle everything from the contracts process soup to nuts for you, that's something that we get requests from different types of organizations in all different industries very, very frequently. We've been seen a big increase in requests for corporate paralegals as well. Kind of that corporate generalist, that has governance experience. We've seen a big increase in requests for entity management projects, so people that have that experience as well, and compliance professionals. So I think these are, and we of course on here see that labor and employment law, the litigation, privacy, as Patrick's been, talking about. But, I would say from just doing this day in and day out, where we're seeing the most demand from, in-house legal departments in the DC areas, in that contracts, corporate governance and entity management space, and compliance professionals.
So we just kind of like to lay the groundwork to sort of lead us into the kind of overall conversation about contract professionals, because I think it's important to understand the job market, where we are. It changes really quickly, because it's not a one size fits all, right? Like, contract professionals aren't always the right solution, but I think it can be in a lot of cases, especially, Katie mentioned it earlier, when there's an element of uncertainty out there, right? Like, companies have been very cautious the last year or so, of maintaining, headcount and that kind of thing. And this is sort of a workaround, right? Like, it's an opportunity for you to, not, increase your headcount, but get that, help that you need to, do other things and, focus on, more important things while someone, comes in and takes, X, Y, and Z off your plate.
All right, and we've got a couple of case studies here too, just to give you some examples of how, Robert Half clients have utilized contractors, to help their workloads. So as you can see here, this is an interim legal support for a workload. So a large school district had a high turnover in its legal department, needed to quickly reduce the staff's workload. The district also lacked the headcount to complete special projects and preferred not to add permanent positions. So we were able to find legal professionals that could work remotely on contract assignment within 5 to 10 days of the client's request. We're able to deploy people immediately, enabling these previously evaluated professionals to begin work on the projects. And we provided 15 attorneys either on contract basis for the role, and brought in skilled talent that assisted the district with these special projects, including negotiating legal agreements, managing labor and employment claims, handling personal injury litigation, and reduced the outside legal fees by about 45%. I think that's another big incentive here in terms of utilizing contract professionals for certain projects. We're not a competitor of the law firm. There's always going to be things that you need to go to outside counsel for, but there are certain projects that you can, manage in-house by bringing on some contractors and greatly reduce that outside counsel spend. And so like in this particular case study, it's, with multiple attorneys for a project, that might just mean one contractor to do contracts review for you, or whatever that might be. But that's something that you might typically send again to your outside counsel, that's going to cost you a couple $100s an hour. We can do at a lower cost point that you would manage yourself. But that is something that's really appealing to our clients in another way, that they utilize contract professionals and have found a lot of benefit from that.
Yeah, and I think again, to Katie's point, it's like we're not sort of a replacement for outside counsel. I got a call yesterday, and we do get a lot of calls, from people looking for an attorney, And a lot of times, like Katie and I are like, our first question is, all right, we just want to make sure that they're not going to court. They're not signing off on legal documents. Like there needs to be an element of oversight. They can draft documents, but at the end of the day, they need, a law firm managing them or, an in-house counsel to, sign off on their work. But they do tend to be much, much more cost effective, than, reaching out to outside counsel. But again, there's definitely times where I'll tell a client, you need to call outside counsel, you need to call a law firm, because that's just, kind of not what we do. Second case study, and this is the last one, and then we're going to kind of get into more of a discussion and bring Frieza in here. But we, I think I remember this one. It was a couple months ago, and a client, had to hire an attorney, high level skills. So industry specific, a lot of times, like we'll get a call, like I need someone with, pharmaceutical experience or manufacturing experience or experience with like finance, SEC. And those lend itself pretty good for, contractors or consultants, because we can typically find people like that. We have a lot of, really sophisticated research, licenses on LinkedIn. And, we have a recruiting team behind us that interviews probably 40 to 50 attorneys, paralegals, contracts managers each week that we bring to market and try to find work for. So, a lot of times we'll talk to a client, they lose two people, and it's very unexpected. We can typically, kind of swoop in, get a gauge on what their, what skills they're looking for, what the roles look like. And we're typically able to get them options within, 24 hours, So I think one of the benefits is if it's a quick need, typically we have, 2, 3, 4 candidates on standby, ready to go at any time. People we've met, references checked, and ready to deploy. In some cases, they're candidates that we've worked with before, so they have a proven track record. And with Robert Half, we have a division actually that I manage. It's called we have a lot of acronyms. It's called our FTEP division. Stands for full-time engagement professionals. So we actually have attorneys, paralegals who are full-time salaried consultants with Robert Half, who we loan out for longer-term projects. So we pay them in between engagements. They have all the benefits that Katie and I have, at Robert Half. They get days off, and they've kind of chosen the lifestyle of, dropping into a company for, 4 or 5 months or to a year and helping, legal departments, contracts departments, through a busy time. And then when that work sort of slows down or wraps up, or you hire full-time people, then, they kind of transition out. They can train your new people. So, there's sort of that like stopgap interim solution. And so we do that. The result, we contracted with 2 attorneys, one of our full-time engagement professionals, for, temporarily to fill a gap. We reduce the client's costs related to outside counsel, and then, provided flexible recruitment options that help staff roles and, finish up projects on an efficient manner.
And then Patrick, we do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Says, Regina Shelley says, what are your thoughts about having something like a help desk as opposed to contract workers on a fixed term, a help desk that you can offload certain daily tasks on as the need arises?
So if I'm understanding, so like a help desk, like when I think of help desk, I think of like a technology, like support, like person.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Regina, if you want to
Patrick,
elaborate a little bit on that.
yes, I'm curious because my company they do utilize a lot of contract workers, but there's certain departments that are trying to cut down on that because that can get kind of expensive over time. And we've discussed options such as having just, I guess it would be a group of like contract workers, but they're not on a fixed term. We call them a help desk, but what they essentially are is people you can just contact and say, look, I need support with this task, whether it be like just a task that would take maybe just a day or two, or sometimes even a couple hours to do. It's not like a lengthy project, but it's someone who can support with like the daily work where the team's getting overwhelmed with it and they just need to offload certain things. I don't know if that's kind of a novel option, or if other companies are looking at that, or if that is something that's, it's even possible in the temporary support world.
Yeah, it is. We have a number of clients. I mean, essentially, it's we're taking one of our candidates who we've met, introducing you, and they're sort of on standby. I have a handful of clients right now who just utilize someone, 4 or 5 hours a week to help them format documents because they don't have. It's a nonprofit, so they don't have a ton of budget. But we introduced him to a litigation, paralegal who has great administrative skills, knows Word like the back of her hand. And, they just send a couple hours of work to her, have her on speed dial. She submits a timesheet, she gets paid when they approve her time. So I would say the majority of the people that we have on billing are full 40-hour employees. They're submitting timesheets for, close to 40, or if not 40, sometimes overtime. But we have a handful of consultants that, just support a client on an as needed basis. And if they don't work 1 week, they just click into the time portal and say, no time to report. And, when the client reaches out, they submit their timesheet. We set it up like that. So yeah, that's definitely, something that's possible, and that's done quite a bit.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. That's helpful.
Yeah. And so, those were, a couple of kind of case studies that, Katie and I highlighted that we pulled from our, testimonials, projects that have been done sort of, across the country. But we wanted to highlight, just some questions, that might be on people's minds. If you've never worked with a, consultant or a contractor before, I think, a lot of times people tend to think of them as like a temporary or, secretary or admin, that kind of thing. And that's not really the case. We work with, I've worked with placed general counsels, corporate counsels with 20 to 30 years of experience, to come in and, help. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to it. So I feel like I've been talking a lot. I don't know, Fariza, I know we kind of went over this, the other day. I don't know if you had any thoughts, or, I know you have experience working with contractors.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. So just coming at things from the perspective of a larger organization. I'm at WTW, so we are obviously have a larger footprint and have a lot of employees, and our OGC is sizable. I will say that we have utilized contract professionals, and it has been extremely helpful for our legal colleagues. And we've kind of touched on this. There have been situations, and there will be situations for every organization's OGC, where individuals have to go on leave, or we are looking for backfill because someone's retiring, or there is a special project that our team is not able to efficiently satisfy for the business. So we've had to bring in individuals completely dedicated for a certain period of time for a particular special project. And as Patrick alluded to, we've been able to find individuals who, for example, in our health and benefits space, just an interesting special project that did come up required somebody who had, significant HIPAA and ERISA experience. And we were able to find somebody who actually, in my opinion, was able to service that particular project, better than probably anyone we had on staff, because they had that niche expertise. So it actually worked out wonderfully. So there are a lot of opportunities for that kind of onboarding, either temporarily or sometimes it may even transfer into a permanent role. If timing is right, maybe somebody's leaving the company and a temporary attorney who's been with us has obviously proven to be of great value to the team. We have been able to onboard that person for a permanent position. So it absolutely does happen. And it actually works out so wonderfully because that knowledge transfer investment is reduced by a lot because that individual already has so much familiarity with the organization, with the different businesses, the different segments, the contracting nuances, and considerations that would go into those contracts for each of those segments. And so they just kind of seamlessly transition into that role. So absolutely happens. And I did want to also mention Regina had posed an interesting question about the help desk concept. And I would say that it's an interesting concept, absolutely. And I think it really depends on the type of work that you are looking to offload from your teams. I think if it's lower complexity and less nuanced, it's a model that can absolutely be implemented. But it really does depend whether there needs to be more of an institutional knowledge that kind of goes with the tasks. In those particular cases, obviously, there would have to be some investment made for training up that individual or those individuals, depending, in order for them to be able to appropriately address any issues. So something to just keep in the back of your mind, depending on what you're looking to offload. Just wanted to also note, as far as challenges, I know we've talked a lot about obviously the benefits, and they're certainly there. Some challenges and some of the downsides that we've experienced. It is, I'll put this lightly, but when you do make that initial investment in the temporary contracting attorney or legal professional that is onboarded, there is, a dedicated amount of time that goes to onboarding that person, getting them familiarized with the organization, especially if it's a larger organization with multiple segments and multiple, lines of business. There is that training that has to happen. And so to have that person on for a shorter period of time and unfortunately maybe have them, move on to another project or move on to something else, it does require a little bit more of an investment, bringing somebody on, whether on another temporary position or as a permanent position, depending on where your organization's going with their needs. So there is that consideration as far as depending on the revolving door or, whatever budgeting restrictions you may be under as an organization. There needs to be some consideration given to the amount of knowledge transfer and training that might need to go into filling a particular role. So just something to keep in the back of your minds as well.
And I would 100% agree with that as well. I think, for Issa, you're 100% right. Whenever clients call in, and we're talking them through the pros and the cons and how the process would work when bringing on a contractor, we're always very transparent that it's a risk whenever you bring on a temporary employee that they may leave and give notice for, a permanent job. At the end of the day, they have to protect their livelihood, and and if there isn't a permanent position at your company and it's truly a contract, there is that risk that they may leave. And so I think that you bring up a great point about the institutional knowledge and the difference, but weighing the difference between what might you need budgetary wise for a shorter term, lower level project versus a longer term, more substantive project where there's going to be a lot of training that goes into it. I know every organization handles things differently, but for us at Robert Half, I know Patrick was talking about this a little bit earlier. We have, we're working with the regular temporary employees on the unemployed market who are available immediately for work. But then we also have our full-time engagement professionals team, which is very similar, like Patrick was mentioning, to a secondment, where they're a permanent employee of Robert Half and they're dedicated to your project for the duration of the role to mitigate that issue that Farisa is talking about with the turnover, where instead of a quote unquote, temporary employee, you have a dedicated Robert Half employee working on your role. So when it is something that's really crucial, that's not going to turn over in 6 months or so, that is another solution that we can provide. And we're also very transparent with our clients about, if you're ever have a role to fill that is a permanent position and you want to do attempt to hire to try the person out, that certainly can work. And we do that, all of the time with clients. But I'm also very transparent that the best solution for that, if you have a permanent role, is probably to partner with our permanent team, like for the exact same reason of that, if you're looking for a temporary hire, they're looking for a permanent role ultimately. So it would be more beneficial for you to hire a permanent employee versus a contractor if it's a permanent role to fill. So just kind of giving that that context, as well as we at most any company that you partner with, the goal is to find the right solution for the need that you have. I know that's always our goal.
Yeah, and I agree too, right? Like I think the hardest conversation that Katie and I will ever have with a client is 2 weeks after we've placed someone, they call us and they say, "Hey, I just got a permanent job offer. It's paying me X amount. Like it's, a great opportunity." And then we're like, "Well, we don't expect you to stay in a contract." So, and then we have to call the client and, let them know. And 2 weeks in, the client loves our candidate, of course. But it's not my favorite. We don't have to do it all that often. I think what maybe doesn't, our clients don't see is behind the scenes, our recruiters pressing these candidates. Like, what do you have in the pipeline? Do you have any offers that are coming? Like the last thing we want to do is place someone and then you spend the time to train them up on your internal processes and, institutional knowledge, and they build that up over 2 weeks. And then you got to start from, square one, and get someone else in there. So that can be frustrating. But, I do think, as far as like benefits go, the flexibility, right? Like I think that if you hire someone full time, you're really investing in that person. And if that person is not working out after, 1, 2, 3 months, it's a process to have to sort of wind them down or get them out of the seat or hire someone else. Contractors kind of go into this work knowing that this is an opportunity to prove themselves, to make a name for themselves with Robert Half, and we'll continue to use them, or work their way into a full-time job if that's in the cards, and the moon's aligned for that. But I do think the setup is such that if it's not working out after 2 weeks, the person's just not picking up quickly. We can call them on a Friday and be like, "Hey, listen, we gotta switch directions," and you don't have that headache of having to sort of off that person with HR, like holding their hands and everything. So the scalability, which Regina talked about, like sort of ramping up but ramping back too, also when the work is slowing down, that's a huge benefit. And sort of the flexible nature of this contract consulting world.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. A lot of, Patrick mentioned earlier, a lot of our in-house teams, a lot of OGCs with many different organizations are going through a similar journey that WTW has been going through as far as implementation of a contract lifecycle management system, potentially making use of AI, generative AI with our contract reviews. So a lot of technology and a lot of new tech implementation has been happening within our OGCs. And honestly, I think without our contract attorneys to be there to help push, our work along and allow for that seamlessness in the work and the work product, I really think we would have completely fallen apart. So it's been completely of value and extremely significant in allowing, the rest of the team who has needed to be dedicated to, the CLMS journey and implementation of certain tech tool journey. And I'm sure what so many of us on this call are experiencing right now, it's really the use of contract attorneys and professionals has allowed for that transformation within our OGC. So definitely of note.
And we do have another question in the chat. Well, more of a comment, but I think one of the pain points with a temporary role is that the company as the contractor fill not only the advertised role, but also other myriad of tasks. When the contractor leaves, it leaves a gap that the company had forgotten that they had. So Farisa, I know obviously you've brought on a lot of contractors within your department. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the hardest part as a manager is really having an appropriate, bird's eye view into what your team is doing and what's going on. It's very difficult to do. It's very hard to keep your finger on the pulse, at all times. So absolutely, there might be certain one-off projects, certain one-off, I don't know, product launches that might have resulted in, a significant amount of contracts that individual may have been handling. We had something like that happen that was not necessarily, at the forefront of our minds and on our radars. So it's an absolutely good point, Regina. But I think, as managers, honestly, just some of the tips that I have found works for us is doing, weekly or biweekly check-ins. A lot of times I keep like a running list of things that what is the status of X project, for example, and making sure that I know what's going on in that world. And just a general idea of volume, a general idea of just capacity among the team. I think, trying to keep on top of that is crucial. There's really no other way around it.
I think we have about 10 minutes left. So if we wanted to move on to some of the onboarding content.
I think that was a good segue, actually.
Yeah.
Farisa mentioned like the frequent touch points, because that was definitely on my list. But before we get to the questions, we did want to show you kind of this timeline, because it can be a long process, when hiring someone, realizing that that person is not going to be a good fit, and then getting them out of the seat, restaffing it. Next thing you know, you have 2 quarters that have gone by, without work, getting done, or minimal work, or you have to unwind work that's, been done. So we kind of like this graphic. Katie, I don't know if you had anything on.
I would just say again, like it does take a little while to fill roles right now, but you don't want to rush it either. So I think that's where a contractor can really be complementary to make sure that you aren't making a bad hire and ending up in this timeline. Like you can bring on a temporary person to get done the absolutely needed work while you do your search to find your perfect person and the contractor helps alleviate some of that pressure so you don't make a bad hire and end up in this situation.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I guess I can kick this off with the onboarding. Um, you know, I think we tend to place people who can have the foundation to get up the field really quickly. We're not placing someone right out of law school, waiting for the bar results, who need training and they need, a lot of time spent to sort of develop, them into someone who can, be self-sufficient. I mean, that can take a year or two. But the people we're placing have 5, 10, 15 years of experience. They've worked in that role for, over a decade. So they have this, set of skills that, they're not going in cold, right? But I do think that there's an element of, spending time on the front end to get the most out of them. And I have clients that do that, and I have clients that don't. And I think, when you can spend that time, the first couple of days, on, the person's, engagement, I think it, pays off exponentially, a month, 2 months down the road.
I couldn't agree more, Patrick. I think that the investment that you make on, at the beginning of the engagement it pays dividends. And I really can't stress that enough. I would say the most valuable thing that we've frankly just recently done within our OGC is putting together a very exhaustive training, multitude of training modules and training playbooks for various different contract types. It's been, trust me when I say, a total pain to put together. But having said that, it's going to make and has already made all of our lives so much easier as far as how quickly we can bring somebody on board and how quickly get them trained up. We have, and I encourage this for every OGC. We have put together, anything from governance training to, our structural org chart as far as like different contracting entities that can contract what business. I mean, things that are so natural for so many of us that have been with a company for so long, but obviously someone who's just walking in may not know. And then various different playbooks with, our plan of attack when we go through a contract, for example. So I think that kind of investment at the front end is so crucial. I also love, and I encourage this for everybody, is to record your trainings. When you're bringing somebody on board, record your trainings. And frankly, you can utilize and leverage those discussion points for your next training. Also cuts down a lot of time. So something to also keep in the back of your minds, just as tips.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
I know. I feel like Parisa, you've touched on kind of the first two there, those first two questions really, really well. I think this next one, the advantages and disadvantages of remote versus in-person hiring, there's definitely pros and cons. Like I think, for a contractor, especially, I think that it's a huge advantage to do remote if you are able to. Because the points we've been making, a lot of times the reason you might be reaching out for a contractor is because you need someone with a certain expertise. The unemployment rates are so low. It is such a tight market that if you're able to do remote, it opens up that pool of candidates tremendously. And, we 100% appreciate for, your permanent hires, creating an office culture, wanting wanting to have, that person be in person, like have in person and accessible for training and development and mentorship. But if they're there to complete a specific project, you have to really weigh like what is the most important thing for this project? Someone that has the skills and abilities that's going to be able to get it done quickly and with as little training and oversight and lift on your end as possible, or someone that may not be as strong but that can just be there twice a week. So it's you kind of have to weigh that when bringing on a contractor. And we recommend, especially for that project driven work, if it can be done remotely, let it be done remotely, even if that's not your policy for your permanent employees. So I'm not sure if Farisa or Patrick, you had anything to add on.
I would just say
that
it might be more cost effective too, because
Yes.
I know for a fact in talking to people, if they can work and log onto a laptop at their kitchen table, they'll take $10 less. That's just kind of how what I'm seeing and just talking to people. Like if they don't have to get in the car and drive 40 minutes out to Tyson's Corner, and they can just work and I know we've been talking about contracts, just negotiate contracts, help with commercial transactions, log on to, Teams or Zoom meetings. That is, that can just be softer on your bottom line.
Yeah, and just to add to that, agreed with all the points. There's workarounds that I find, it has not slowed us down, and it has not impacted the level of work that we see from these contract attorneys or contract legal professionals. I think with the training materials that you as a manager should be doing a good job of developing and keeping tabs on and dispersing and updating. In addition to that, things come up in the day-to-day that may not necessarily be addressed in those, training materials. And that's where that in-person opportunity really, it really shows the value, because you're sitting in front of somebody and something comes up and you can flesh it out, and it really works wonderfully. And I think all of us appreciate the in-person value add. However, if you kind of keep a running list, we have a document of exceptions where, whether it's with a contract review, whether it's just a more general, X, Y, or Z segment takes exception to X, Y, or Z policy, whatever it may be. There's workarounds that allow for that kind of real time, bounce ideas off of each other, discuss something, flesh it out. There are ways to get around that. And so I would definitely encourage everyone to, as much as I appreciate an in-person opportunity when onboarding, I think there are ways to get around that where it won't impact your work product. So yeah.
I would also say is like there might be some concern, having this external resource come in, working from home. What are they doing? Because you can't see them all the time. I would say like we coach our consultants to kind of keep track of like what they're working on, how like kind of like very informally. So if they can ever if they're ever asked, they have this like, oh, I was working on ABC on Monday. Here's what what I was able to accomplish. I do tend to think like people work really well from home, especially those higher level attorney like they're just actors. If they're in between jobs, the company downsized or merged and they got caught up in a layoff, like they just want to get out to work, network, build some relationships, keep their skills sharp. Like those are all like from a candidate standpoint. I know we've been talking a lot about clients, but a lot of like candidates just they want to go out and work, right? Like maybe it doesn't turn into a full-time permanent salary job, but at least they're they have this like kind of job to keep them busy, make a little bit of money, to pass by the time until they are able to secure that full-time position within another company.
All right. Well, I know that we're right at time at 1 o'clock. And so I know it sounds like I think we're done, right? Did we get through everything? Did we get through all the questions? We're at
Yeah,
Q&A
we
now.
yeah we did, and
Finished
we're
right
gonna
on
send
time.
we're gonna send the slideshow out, so you can see those links. There's a salary guide which everyone's interested in. Katie and I are happy to talk to anyone if you had any specific questions or wanted us to walk you through, the data. We're happy to do that. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, we can hang out for a little while.
All right, now we must conclude today's program. On behalf of the chapter, I'd like to extend thanks to Patrick, Katie, and Farisa for speaking today, as well as thanks to Robert Half for their sponsorship of the chapter and today's program. We welcome you to follow up with today's speakers. I've asked them to place their contact info in the chat. Please complete our feedback survey to let us know what you thought about this program and your interest for future programming. Thank you again for joining us today.